Welcome back to the Scions of the Southland recap show. As always, my name is Akshay Shwaran, and joining me is a man who has been messing with numbers recently, Mr. Jake Grant. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing fine. Me and my good pal MATLAB have had quite a time lately. Welcome to Georgia Tech.
Welcome to Georgia Tech, indeed. It is finals week here on the Flats. A very interesting finals week, especially for our podcast scheduling, as we are recording this approximately 8 hours before it's scheduled to go up. So we are going to steal another segment from our good old friends at Split Zone Duo and do a lightning round here. 35 minutes on the clock. You ready to go, pal?
Yes, sir. Let's knock this out.
All right, and three, two, one, here we go. Non-revenue sports news. Women's basketball won another game this week over Tulane, but Tulane hung around for quite a bit longer than they probably should have. Thoughts?
Yeah, we were up two at the half. We started really slow, fell into a 6-point hole and didn't get much going in the first. At the half, we were up 23-21. That is a football score. That is not a basketball halftime score. But we did pull it
Hey,
out.
not in Virginia.
Fair. But we did pull it out in the end, so that's what matters. But we let an 8-point third quarter lead turn into, well, not that with a minute to play. But you win some, you lose some, you win some ugly. But they did what it takes. I think Lorella Kubai gets a big star of the game. Our true freshman off the bench. Leah Love looked good with 10 points, but I think the biggest question is when will Lotamai Latinen kind of get that scoring spark we need her to be. But in the meantime, Lorella Kubai is held up, and I think it's a tough year. They have a really short bench. Most of their scrimmages only have like the minimum of players, and that's something coaches said a couple times. So again, we want to keep expectations high, but also realist, and I think given the constraints and it still being early, I'm still okay with what I've seen.
Yeah, and we still haven't seen Kiera Fletcher play a minute for his team, so he can only really go up from here.
Exactly. I found an RPI source that was a sketchy website that had us at 18, Georgia at 15, and Tulane at 66. But then I realized that those numbers were probably too good to be true, and the NCAA has us all around 64, 66, and like 175 respectively, which matches the smell test a little better. But at the end of the day, a win's a win, and we're going into ACC play this week.
Good stuff. There is no ACC Big Ten challenge for women's basketball for reasons, but there is for the men. And they will play Nebraska later this week. But before that, they played in the Holiday Hoops Giving tournament or invitational. I don't know what it's called, in State Farm Arena downtown. And they beat Kentucky by 17. Explain, please.
Well, I watched the first half and about half the second half before tuning in on the radio for most of the rest of the way because I had to go drive somewhere. But in the first half, we did this thing called limiting turnovers, and it did carry over to the second. But Georgia Tech forced a lot of turnovers, and that put them ahead by a decent amount at the half. And when you keep up that great game plan early, there's really not much you really need to change in the second. Our offense got a little more effective, and when shots fall, and it looked like a different team. It looked like they were playing together better, and I really can't knock that. Josh Pastner executed his offensive and defensive philosophy to a T, and I think this is the brand of basketball he really wants to be playing. And you don't have to score a ton, but you still win by 17, and that's that gritty defense plus somewhat offensive execution.
Yeah, and I think important to note, Moses Wright had 21. This is also the first time a Calipari assistant has beat John Calipari. So that is very cool, very, very cool. Saban hasn't had that yet, despite, numerous overtures from over out there in the eastern part of the country. So there's that. But it really makes you think about sort of what changed after those first two disastrous games versus Mercer and Georgia State, and what we saw on, what was this, Saturday, Sunday night,
Sunday.
Sunday night. Um, all the days blend together at this point. It does sort of beg the question, what's changed. I think Pastor touched a little bit about that on in his press conferences heading into this game, talking about the lack of contact at practices and how they just hadn't gelled as a team without as strenuous practices. I think that's something we touched on last week. Super admirable that he was, willing to go the distance with COVID regulations, but from strictly a sporting perspective, that does not help you win games
I think it's
as much as it might help you avoid infection.
yeah, for sure. Sorry, I thought you were done there. But these very similarly admirable to Jeff Collins wanting to limit his most high contact parts of practice, and we saw how that worked out for our place kicking in football. And there's realities and there's risks, and I hate to say that it's a trade off. Like, we don't want that to be a thing, but Georgia Tech, I think having 2 games under their belt probably helped as well. Just seeing live reps, getting a full extra 20 minutes of play against Georgia State obviously didn't translate against Mercer, but we looked a lot more like the basketball team that left the floor in Clemson in March than we did the one that left the floor against Mercer last Sunday. So I think that's, or not last Sunday, last Friday. I think that's something to hang your hat on, at least.
Yeah. We'll get to Jeff Collins and his football team's escapades in Raleigh in a bit, but first let's recap the other action in the ACC. I, being shorthanded and also late at night, don't have the times for these games next to me, so we're just gonna read these off. Jeff Collins and Paul Johnson's alma mater, Western Carolina 9, North Carolina 49.
Yep.
It
I did not
happened.
watch this game. I have no comments.
I'm sure not many people do. Moving on. Syracuse 21, number 2 Notre Dame 45.
Played him closer than I was giving him credit for, but in the end, the game ended the way we all thought it would.
Yep, Cuse had him for that first quarter. It seemed like it was going to be a struggle, and then Notre Dame boat raced him in the second quarter. And this is like a routine thing that Notre Dame has done to teams this season, where they will sort of start out pretty slow in the first quarter and then make even good teams look like UMass the rest of the way. And it's an incredible credit to defensive coordinator Clark Allay
Yeah,
for making those adjustments.
yeah, they definitely. You could say similar things about their game against NC or UNC. They just got good later than they did in this game, and against the game that we played against them. So, I think it's a hallmark of this team.
Moving right along, Boston College 32, UVA 43. I believe this was Boston College's first game this season without Phil Jurkovec.
Yeah, I was surprised to see it be as much of a shootout as it was, regardless. But it's one of those ACC games that middle of the pack, kind of whatever happens is going to happen.
Coastal Chaos?
Yeah. Well, yeah, as close as you can get.
They made the whole conference out of the Coastal this season, Jake. Moving on, number 3, Clemson 45, Virginia Tech 10. At halftime, Virginia Tech was in this one, and then I don't think they scored a point the entire rest of the way.
Yeah, that's because Virginia Tech is no Clemson.
That's because Virginia Tech, has some question marks a lot of places. I do know that they suffered 2 or 3 QB injuries in this one, so we hope those guys are okay. But lots of question marks all around that program, I feel like.
Yeah.
And then the final game of the day, number 10, Miami basically sits on Duke 48 to zip.
That is Miami's first ACC shutout. Fun fact.
Been in the conference 16, 15 seasons,
Six,
only getting once, despite having a divisional system built for them to be in the title game every year.
yeah, well, go Canes, right?
You win some, you lose some, and apparently you really screw up some. So congratulations, Duke.
All right. Now we're going to
All
talk
right.
about our boys.
We are going to talk about them boys that went down to Raleigh this weekend. Unfortunately, they did suffer a 23 to 13 loss. Let's bring back the good cop bad cop bit from last week while we have our remaining 25 minutes here. Give me your good takes. What good takes do you have from this game?
With half the defensive starters being out, I think our defense only holding a pretty decent NC State team to 23 points is definitely a high point.
Is that it? That's it?
We're going to trade them off. On offense,
Oh, okay.
the run game looked good. I wish we would have stuck to it more. I liked how Adonicus was playing. False starts, obviously, that's killed us all year, but can't really do much about that.
Hey. Stick to your side of the shot sheet here.
Well, this is before I pull off the mask and just start yelling about reffing. But yeah, no.
We'll get there.
Held on to the ball all right, but definitely that was just because we got back on top of it when we did let it go. But that's your thing, and I need to stop doing that.
You're slipping here.
Let's see.
You're grasping at straws.
We made 2 field goals in the same game.
For the first, it was the first attempted field goals in since week 1. Week 2.
I think the the last one we attempted wound up in the west stands. I kid you not, or something close to that. So
yeah, I mean, field goal kicking, as we referred to before, it was an adventure.
Yeah, well, before I start yelling about reffing, let me hear your bad cop takes.
Okay, let's do some bad cop here. Offensively, this team, like point blank, I will say it was ineffective most of the night. Like it was just very frustrating to watch us just not be able to move the ball on this NC State defense. And I think our writers' room had some good points, especially when that middle of that field was seemingly wide open and a little soft. We just didn't go there until the second half, and we were already chasing the game. And I would have really liked to see us do that a little bit more in the first half, throwing those short and medium passes, and not relying on the run as the end all be all. Obviously, like you were saying, the run was sort of the only thing that was working for a while. But you gotta mix it up a little, even if it's not working. Sims could have been better in that first half. I thought he settled in very nicely in the second half and made some really mature throws, but that first half was, oh boy, it was not fun to watch. I think the big thing he struggled with was that he didn't have Gibbs as the usual safety valve on a lot of those HB angle routes outside on the screen, or outside in the flat, sorry. So he was forced to scramble and ad lib a lot. Let's see what else. Other offensive points. I mean, you mentioned not having turnovers. That's good on the face. And then you sort of look back at the game tape and realize that Tech recovered at least one of its own fumbles. So, those are very luck based, as our good friend Bill Conley at ESPN likes to tell us. So, luck was in our favor this time. I don't have the numbers in front of you to tell you exactly how much, but I mean, I'll take it in that case. The big thing on the offensive side of the ball were the penalties. And I know you're going to talk about reffing in a little bit, especially I'm sure you have some thoughts on the DPI calls down the sideline on Zamari Walton. Um, I'll speak for the offensive ones at least. The penalties were killers, especially when a drive starts at the NC State one, or at least progresses the way all the way to the NC State one, and then you come away with, I think, no points. That is just not good. That is absolutely terrible. And there's no two ways about it. I will be blunt about it because the amount of expected points lost there, and I don't even have the numbers in front of me. I can just tell you, just a guessing, the amount of expected points lost when you are at the one and give up and have two false starts is monumental, just monumental. And I think it's something we've been sort of talking about since the first bye week, uh, as problems that we've seen, and it's just that has not been cleaned up at all. And it's I was saying this on Twitter too. It's been a recurring theme in each of these losses. It's uh, penalties and poor red zone execution and a lot of these other things where you can see what they're trying to do, but it's these really small mental mistakes that are costing them valuable field position, valuable, efficiency, valuable effectiveness.
Yeah,
All right,
and
go on with your reffing spiel here.
and to hedge at first, the refs are going to call a false start against Georgia Tech on the one because Georgia Tech false starts. That's not really that's something we've seen all year, and we know that's a problem for this team. I don't have issues with that. What I do have issues with is questionable, opinionated calls, which seem to affect Georgia Tech a lot, whether it's defensive pass interference or something else. But in this case, it was constant
Defensive pass interference.
weak sauce DPIs or overblown whatever that consistently keeps a young team out of games. And I get it. For some reason, it always happens to us. For a while, I accepted this as our lot in life or whatever. But it seems no matter if it's basketball or football, or even sometimes baseball, Georgia Tech just cannot catch
Oof.
a break. Just cannot catch a break. And I don't.
Welcome to Atlanta sports, buddy.
I don't. I don't
Enjoy it.
what the logical person inside of me goes, there's no way that there's some vast conspiracy, because there's not. There's almost certainly not. But
Wait. Hold on. Before you continue, you're a Cubs fan. You know about existential dread and lot in life kind of deal. I would actually peg you as the person that would have a conspiracy theory about reffing in this case.
to be fair, I am one of the most superstitious sports people I know. So yes, you're right.
Just a little stitious.
But I don't. I don't want you to be right. It's it's not a satisfying way to look at a football game and go, there's literally nothing we could have done because that was going to get called no matter what. Because I feel like that's pretty fair of an assessment to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when yeah, you can if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, right? You can score on the one. You can do this differently. You can do that differently. You can not have 5 injured defensive starters. But even when you execute something right, you're still getting called. That makes it really hard to win a football game. And that doesn't excuse other things, but it's just another brick on a giant stack,
Are you saying that you're building the program brick by brick? This is a very esoteric reference.
Yes, I get the reference. I appreciate the reference. I will allow you to explain it if you want to, but my lot in life right now is just to be flustered because I don't know. Do we win if that goes different? Heck, it might still be 23-13. If you change one play in any given game, the entire you can't leave the rest after that the same. Like everything's going to happen differently. It's a butterfly effect. That's how it works. But I don't know. It's really hard to win when your offense finally clicks and you get down to the one and you shoot yourself in the foot. It's really hard to win when you defend a pass and it gets called a DPI, I think 3 different times in the game. Like
Oh, it was at least 4 or 5. Let's be clear here. There were a number.
I'm the
Like
good cop,
they were picking on Zamari Walton for a lot of the night.
Yeah, and maybe I never played the game, guys. I'm a swimmer. I'm a water polo player. I play baseball. Like this is not. I'm a non-rev writer, for goodness sakes. I just sit here like all of you and watch a football game with my favorite team. So I'm not the expert of, oh, maybe he did this X, Y, and Z thing. I'm trying to vent my frustration, and what I see is something that is at least a little bit slanted. If I'm wrong, feel free to leave a comment.
It's okay. This is a safe space. It's okay.
But yeah, exactly. I see things in games that make me really excited for the future. I see things in the program and in how athletic director Todd Stansbury leads the program, and the excitement around that. Just say somebody like an Andy Demetra or Sean Bedford or Wiley Ballard brings to being a Tech fan, and being around something where you see something exciting, but the frustrating stuff still happens. It's the same stuff as always until the ACC changed the rule. Oh, of course Duke's going to get the bye week before Tech. Stuff like that just never really seems to go away. Obviously that in that case did, but like you can get a new coach, you can 404 the culture all you want, but like some things never change.
Uh, I don't know. I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate. I know I'm pushing my luck here, but I think some of those, I think there were a couple of those who were definitely 50-50 DPI calls. There were a couple of other ones, and the one I'm thinking about specifically is the one where the NC State receiver made the catch out of bounds, but still got the call, where it looked very suspiciously like he pushed off out of bounds to
Yep.
make the catch, and then it sort of left the defensive back hanging and out to dry. And I agree that it's very frustrating. Like it's
Well,
just
that's an offensive
demoralizing at a
penalty.
certain level to watch, right? What's
Yeah,
that?
well, and to see something that could be OPI turn into DPI, that's a big swing.
Yeah, and again, I wish I had like the expected point swings to really tell you how important these were, but it's demoralizing to watch as a fan when you get some of these calls that go against you, and then you also get a lot of them that go against you in the same game, and they all look, frankly, similar. I will say that part of it is going to be NC State's best receiver um, paired up against. I think Walton was paired up against him most of the night, and sometimes it felt like the receiver was just out physicaling him, and maybe one or two of those are like legit DPI calls, but I mean, when both corners or when both players are hand fighting, you can't throw the flag there. Like that's something that we see at a lot of levels of football. Um, you can't throw the flag when you see both players engaged the whole way down the field and the corner turns his head properly. And we saw that
Yep.
a couple times, and that was disappointing for me. Just
For
to sort of
all
tie the bow on.
I want to make one last point. For all that we
Yeah, go
go,
for it.
wow, Jeff Collins, coach him up better to not get a false start or something like that. In this case, his corners, I like how they execute a lot, and it sucks to see them get negatively reinforced for that.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, something that we touched on last week was Chase Bryce sort of bombing it every chance that he could against man coverage on the sidelines, and Bailey Hockman did the exact same thing with Zamari Walton and the receiver he was covering, who I can't remember the name of. And the thing is, they didn't call pass interference last week, but they called pass interference this week. So it's more or less the same exact game plan. I didn't actually touch on it because I was gonna segue into talking about the defense, but like when Hawkman was able to set his feet and throw, he was able to make some like really nice throws. Um, the problem is that they came at our expense,
Yep.
and that's super frustrating because it was again the exact same like like coverage mistakes. Like you saw him find receivers sitting in the seams between zones. You saw him hitting receivers on comeback routes as the pocket broke down. I think at the end of the day, like you were saying way before when we were starting the podcast or starting this segment, like this was a really good performance from a very depleted group of guys. Tech had something along the lines of 54 active scholarship players available, which is, I think, one above the minimum. So, I mean, a Herculean effort. And I think I said this on Twitter. It's not the defense that lost this game for Tech. You can argue that, especially at the very end, with the last couple of stops that they got, they kept Tech in it, and it was an admirable effort from the guys that were in, and even the guys that were playing through injury, because we had a lot of guys go down with cramping, and soreness and just fatigue, uh,
Yeah.
and and you saw them play through it and really put Tech in a position to finish off that comeback, and it was just not meant to be. Um, Special teams, just to tie the bow on this game. Um, Kickoff coverage was okay. I didn't really see a ton of problems with that. Gavin Stewart was perfect on kicks. He's still perfect on kicks after the triple bye week, which is fantastic, and I genuinely applaud him for it. I know we gave him a lot of grief earlier this season, but he's rounded into form, and that's really awesome to see. On the flip side of that, though, I don't have any insider knowledge on this, but my gut feeling is that Percy Harvin is still not absolutely 100%. We did see a couple of shaky punts in this game from him. So hopefully he's back to full punting strength on Thursday for Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Um, I mean, as he goes, we go. If you, I said
Oh, absolutely.
I said this when he got recruited. You don't ever want to give up the ball, but if you do, you want to have the best guy back there doing it. Um, and I think that him at full strength would definitely be helpful. But I don't know. It was good to see him back out there too. So definitely an improvement over Duke, and good on Austin for filling in when he had to. But we all know that our large punting son is our large punting son. You know.
Yeah, and Kent's still doing the kickoffs. So and kickoff, just the what am I talking about? The length of the kickoffs, the distance of the kickoffs has been much better than last year. I think we're still consistently hitting the 5 instead of the 10 when that kick comes down. And sometimes there are touchbacks, which, we only had like 3 of those last season, so I will take what I can get. Um, but it's the punt coverage and the kickoff coverage that I think are the questionable parts of the special teams unit, and the S&P rank really showcases that. We were 119th the last time I checked, and this week we are 117th in terms of special teams. So there's a long way to go and a lot of improvement that can be made there.
Yeah. And I think we'll start to see that too. I don't know. I think it's something that we need to grow a lot. I think having a special teams coordinator would help that too. But you know, it'll fall off whenever Presley does leave. But in terms of the other stuff around it, I would hope that there's not much else to go other than up there. You know.
Mhm. Speaking of improvements that can be made and the timeline to make them in Pittsburgh is coming up on Thursday. That will be December 10th at 7 p.m. on your local RSN. Pitt is coming off of a bye week, and Tech is obviously coming off of the short week of playing on Saturday. Our friends in the desert have Pittsburgh favored by 6. SP Plus has Pitt favored by 3. Side note, we should really start calling our friends like Bill Connolly and everyone at ESPN our friends in Connecticut, just like we call the Vegas boys our friends in the desert. I think those two play very nicely off of each other. And just to round out the group, FPI has Pitt winning 73% of the time. So, Mr. Grant, with the just over 5 minutes that we have left on our timer here, give me your high level take on what you want to see from this game.
Well, first, if you have a lane, you have a chance. Love that. You might be favored to lose 73% of the time, but 27% ain't bad either. I think Georgia Tech definitely has a path to win. I think from the defensive side, other than the DPIs, it looks a lot similar to how it does last week. We do have a built-in advantage of not playing a Tobacco Road school on the road. Haha, funny jokes. But like I said, I think it looks the same. Pitt is a pretty defensive-minded program. It shows in the numbers. Obviously, their special teams is very high based on SP plus, but their defense is their calling card. And what happens when a team of a defense goes up against a team that has looked defensively pretty good its last 2 games? Well, whose offense is going to step up? And I think Georgia Tech has the capability to do that. I'd love to see Jupiter back. I don't really know what's up there, but we do have a lot in the stable. I'd love to see Adonicus back. Like I said, or not Adonicus, Amarian Brown back. Sorry, force of habit. Adonicus looked really good, but maybe if he has another week like he did, things look a little bit different. It's a couple caught passes can really change a game. And I think Georgia Tech on a Thursday night under the lights, it may be chilly, but we have a lane here.
It is, I think, the latest home game at Bobby Dodd Stadium ever. I don't have you're the history guy, so you tell me if that's right, but it sure does sound like the latest home game, or latest in the season, not latest by time, home game at Bobby Dodd ever.
Well, it is the latest, as in most recent. But no, it almost certainly is. I don't think we've played any games this late into the season off the top of my head. At least at Bobby Dodd, there are a couple of years where we started the season later in the year, but we also didn't play 12 games in a season. Well, I guess we're only playing 11, but you get the point. Like, season was shorter, so if you start September 23rd, you're only playing 10 games. You're still not playing on December 10th. I'll look into that.
Unprecedented territory.
Exactly. I'll get a look on that, and I will get back to us. But I'm almost certain that that is the case. That this is the most chilly December game we'll ever have played. It'll be like October in the Midwest. Perfect.
Oh, stop it! It's like the 2 weeks in Atlanta where it gets below freezing. Don't be dramatic.
Well, you know me. Never dramatic, ever.
All right, just to sort of recap my thoughts, Jake said it best. I think Pitt is a very defensive-minded team. Pat Narduzzi is like the poster child for defensive-minded head coaches, conservative play calling on offense, notably for his proclivity to kick field goals while down multiple touchdowns. I don't think that proclivity is going to come into play during this game. Like you said, I think it comes down to the offensive execution. Which Kenny Pickett shows up for Pitt? Is it going to be good Kenny or bad Kenny? It just so happens that Tech, every time they play Pittsburgh, they get good Kenny. I'm really hoping that Kenny has used up his good boy points this season, because a win for the last home game on the flats this season would sure be nice. I know you'd definitely like one, seeing as this will be your last home game as a student.
Yeah. Also, props to facilities. they're going to pull off something great this weekend in having fans in for football on Thursday, having grad ceremonies Friday, Saturday outdoors at Bobby Dodd. So I think we as alumnuses slash students slash future second alumnuses of this school.
Yeah, don't get ahead of yourself there.
Hey, I already graduated once. Just
Once.
what was I going to say? But we really appreciate all the work that goes in behind the scenes from more of our. We will shout out Chris May twice a day until the sun stops shining. But just the unsung heroes of athletics facilities, Georgia Tech facilities, and just all that for pulling it off.
30 seconds, Mr. Grant. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up for tonight?
Nebraska ball this Wednesday at 7:15 on ESPNU. And then if you're really itching for sports, you got women tipping off their ACC schedule right about the same time, and then another game against Notre Dame on a Sunday. But other than that, if you're a student listening, good luck on finals. If you're not, go order your Christmas gifts. That's what I got.
Yeah, we should all do that. Homefieldapparel.com, not an actual sponsor, but definitely a site we love, and we want to get some more attention.
Yep, agreed.
All right, Mr. Grant, I will see you later this week to talk about more Georgia Tech sports. Listeners, thank you for listening, and we will see you again soon.